Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Tuesday, July 4th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things, because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our morning by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discussed today, please chime in the comments section below. There is no international observance for today, but as I'm sure you are all aware, today is American Independence Day, or the 4th of July. This has been a federal holiday in the United States since 1941, but the tradition of Independence Day celebrations goes back to the 18th century and the American Revolution. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress voted in favor of independence, and 2 days later, delegates from the 13 colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence, a historic document drafted by Thomas Jefferson. From 1776 to the present day, July 4th has been celebrated as the birth of American independence, with festivities ranging from fireworks, parades, and concerts to more casual family gatherings and barbecues. Now, if you're like me, this holiday might cause you to cringe, whether because of your general disregard for tribalism or because of your disillusionment with the American government and/or the American dream. This year for July 4th, my local community has put on several events, with live music and fireworks, but I just didn't feel like participating. And, there's something going on tonight and something going on tomorrow night, and I think I'm just going to stay home because I'm not into it, you know what I mean? But I do like to consider both sides of every coin. So this morning I have kind of been playing devil's advocate with myself and kind of probing this, what I consider to be a knee-jerk reaction against tribalism. And I've been, considering the other side from my perspective. So the word tribalism is defined as tribal consciousness and loyalty, or strong in-group loyalty. But the thing is, being part of a tribe is a keystone experience of being human. It's like a keystone human experience. We evolved as social animals. We don't just need human interaction. We are wired to live and work in groups, and we can make more progress through collaboration. So this morning, I wanted to share with you what I think is a really interesting argument for tribalism and against individualism from Team Human by Douglas Rushkoff. Now, that introduction saying that this argument is for tribalism and against individualism is oversimplifying it, as Douglas Rushkoff is simply calling for us to kind of move the scales slightly away from individualism and more toward tribalism, but all should become clear in a moment. So Douglas writes, "The original Renaissance brought us from a flat world to one with perspective and depth. Our Renaissance potentially brings us from a world of objects to one of connections and patterns. The world can be understood as a fractal, where each piece reflects the whole. Nothing can be isolated or externalized since it's always part of the larger system. The first individuals and organizations to capitalize on the digital era ignored the underlying values that their innovations could have retrieved. They childishly assumed that they were doing something absolutely new, disrupting existing hierarchies and replacing them with something or someone better, usually themselves. The early founders merely changed the ticker symbols on Wall Street from old tech companies to new tech companies, and the medium used to display them from paper tape to LEDs. The digital revolution was no more than a superficial changing of the guard. Yet, if we dispense with the need to believe our innovations are wholly original, we free ourselves to recognize the tidal patterns of which they are a part. The original Renaissance, for instance, retrieved the values of ancient Greece and Rome. This was reflected not just in the philosophy, aesthetics, and architecture of the period, but in the social agenda. Central currency favored central authorities, nation-states, and colonialism. These values had been lost since the fall of the Roman Empire. The Renaissance retrieved those ideals through its monarchies, economics, colonialism, and applied science. So, what values can be retrieved by our Renaissance? The values that were lost or repressed during the last one: environmentalism, women's rights, peer-to-peer economics, and localism. The over-rationalized, alienating approach to science is now joined by the newly retrieved approaches of holism and connectedness. We see peer-to-peer networks and crowdfunding replacing the top-down patronage of the Renaissance, retrieving a spirit of mutual aid and community. Even the styles and culture around this activity, from Burning Man and craft beer to piercing and herbal potions, retrieved the human-scaled medieval sensibilities repressed by the Renaissance. A Renaissance does not mean a return to the past. We don't go back to the Middle Ages, bloodletting, feudalism, or sword fights in the street. Rather, we bring forward themes and values of previous ages and reinvent them in new forms. Retrieval makes progress less purely linear, not so much a ladder as a spiral staircase, continually repeating the same pattern, but ascending all the way. Retrieval helps us experience the insight of pre-modern cultures that nothing is absolutely new. Everything is renewal. So, this metaphor of a spiral staircase for making progress is fascinating to me. There's a quote that I heard somewhat recently that I couldn't find this morning, but it basically says that it's not hard work that makes progress, it's rework that makes real progress. If you know the quote I'm talking about, please leave it in the comments, but even if you've never heard this one, hopefully you get the idea. Even on an individual level, working hard isn't enough. We have to continually return to the same problems again and again over a period of years to produce our best work. And if it's like this on an individual level, wouldn't it make sense that humanity should make progress like this on a collective level? So, Douglas Rushkoff continues. The most explicitly human value retrieved by the Renaissance, and the one we're most hampered by today, was the myth of the individual. Leonardo da Vinci's iconic Vitruvian Man, the 1940 drawing of a man that would be the 1490 drawing of a man perfectly proportioned within a circle and a square, presented the human form in the idealized geometric terms of the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius. The individual human body was celebrated as an analogy for the perfect workings of the universe. Almost all of the period's innovations retrieved some aspect of individuality. The printing press, much to the frustration of the priests, gave everyone Bibles and the opportunity to interpret the gospel for themselves. This led to Protestantism, personal salvation, and a more individual relationship to God. Reading a book was a personal activity. The gentleman reading in his study retrieved the image of the Greek citizen, a slave-owning white male who thinks he lives by the principles of democracy. Perspective painting similarly emphasized the point of view of an individual observer, as well as a single best position from which to view a work. It wasn't until the Renaissance that people started to think of themselves as having personal lives, struggles, and destinies, and that these individual interests had to be weighed against the public good. This gave rise to the Enlightenment, human rights, democracy, and these are all almost unequivocally positive developments. When the individual's needs are balanced with those of the collective, things stay in balance. But when people are understood as self-interested individuals in competition against one another for survival and dominance, we get into trouble. Yet that's precisely what the economic reformations of the same Renaissance demanded. Central currency turned tokens, a utility for exchange, into a scarce commodity. The Renaissance's chartered monopolies transformed craftspeople and cooperative commons users into expendable employees competing for a day's work. The myth of individuality made capitalism possible and has sustained it to this day. Economists modeled the market on the false premise that human beings are entirely rational individuals acting in their own self-interest, and corporations learned to stoke consumption by reinforcing our identities as individual consumers. Why sit on a streetcar with your friends when you can be driving your own car all alone? Why borrow your neighbor's lawnmower when you can have your own? What's a house in the suburbs without a fence defining your property? Capitalism's vision of the individual was a completely self-interested being, whose survival was a Darwinian battle royale, at odds with our social evolution and our neurobiology. But unless we consciously retrieve the power inherent in our collective nature, we will remain unable to defend ourselves against those who would continue to use our quest for individuality against us. So if you are, an American or somebody who hasn't thought a lot about these systems, I know that passage can be kind of inflammatory. When I first read it, I was like, what is this? Reading this book was honestly a roller coaster for me, but once again, I highly recommend it. So yes, trust me, I understand that, somebody criticizing individuality it comes off as wacky, because I personally have always greatly prized my individuality, my free will and my ability to go off and do whatever I want on my own at any time. I love that. And so I know that hearing a criticism of individuality and hearing it being called a problem is kind of problematic, but I think Douglas Rushkoff has a really great point, and it's that we are basically too far balanced toward individuality, and we just need to come back kind of closer to the center to balance our individualities with the people and the ecosystem in which we live, or with which we live. So for our feel-good moment today, I'm going to share with you Douglas Rushkoff's vision for what he believes today's Renaissance should look like. And I hope you love this, because I really do. The beauty of living in a Renaissance moment is that we can retrieve what we lost the last time around. Just as medieval Europeans retrieved the ancient Greek conception of the individual, we can retrieve the medieval and ancient understandings of the collective. We can retrieve the approaches, behaviors, and institutions that promote our social coherence. Revolution alone won't work. Neither will the blanket rejection of the values of the last Renaissance, such as science, order, control, centrality, or even individuality. Instead, we should accept them as the context in which to bring forth their counterparts, or rather, complements. The ideals of the prior Renaissance are the ground in which these lost ideals are retrieved. We're moving from one understanding of our place in things to another. The Renaissance may have brought us from the tribal to the individual, but our current Renaissance is bringing us from individualism to something else. We're discovering a collective sensibility that's more dimensional and participatory than the unconsciously formed communities of the past. We had to pass through this stage of individualism in order to get there. Children must learn to separate from their parents and experience themselves as ego-driven individuals before they connect to others and establish meaningful relationships or intimacy. Likewise, human beings first need to emerge from the ground and become figures, the subjects of our own stories. This was a dimensional leap, from one big blob to discrete individuals, each with our own intersectional identities. And now it's time for yet another leap. We don't yet have great ways for talking about this new spirit of collectivism. The relationship between individuals and society has always been framed as a necessary compromise. We are told that we must sacrifice our personal goals for the sake of the many. But what if it's not a zero-sum either-or? Humans at our best are capable of embracing seeming paradox. We push through the contradiction and find a dynamic sensibility on the other side. We can think of our newly retrieved collectivism as a way of being both figure and ground at the same time. This is the idealized artistic community envisioned by Burning Man. It's the politics of consensus that informed Occupy, and it's the distributed economy aspired to by the open source and blockchain movements, to name just a few. Each of these movements depends on our comfort with what we could call a fractal sensibility, the notion that each tiny part of a system echoes the shape and structure of the whole. Just as the veins within the leaf of a single fern reflect the branches, trees, and structure of an entire forest, the thoughts and intentions of a single individual reflect the consciousness of the whole human organism. The key to experiencing one's individuality is to perceive the way it is reflected in the whole and, in turn, resonate with something greater than oneself. So, for yesterday's focus moment, I asked you to consider your own connections to other humans. Well, this morning, I want you to consider the fractal relationship between you and any groups that you are a part of. Douglas writes that a fractal sensibility is the notion that each tiny part of a system echoes the shape and structure of the whole. I believe that we can change the nature of the groups of which we are a part by changing ourselves on the individual level. After all, organizations are made up of individuals. So if all of the individuals in a group have the common value of, say, egalitarianism, then the group will enact that value through its processes and systems. This can be applied to businesses, churches, social cliques, families, and yes, even governmental organizations. Ironically, I started this episode by thinking about my own anti-tribalist knee-jerk reaction to the Independence Day or July 4th holiday, and one of the primary values bolstered by this patriotic holiday is individualism. So, by embracing tribalism, I am once again rejecting the holiday, or at least part of it. But that's okay. One of the most helpful concepts I've derived from reading Team Human is to never throw out any one concept or idea. The world is complex, a beautiful mosaic far too intricate and expansive for any single human to fully comprehend. The best we can do is to build up the good and chip away at the bad, bit by bit, day by day, person by person. And we can also hope, trust, and maybe even believe that one day this process will be reflected in our local communities and maybe even the whole world. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will be off tomorrow, but I will speak with you again on Thursday.